Hey guys, what is up? Super K-Man Rocks here, and we have made it. It is time for the finals of the 2024 Mid-Season Invitational. The overview, the analysis for all of the necessary games, the final series of MSI, the final series of kind of the first half of the year here. We're, jumping right into the second half later on in the month, but I'm really excited to talk about this series. It is currently the two best teams in the world going head-to-head in this series, and there's nothing that you could ask for more than this. These are the two teams that have proven that they deserve to be here. Not only were they the two teams that, met in winners finals, got through the first part of the bracket unscathed, but, BLG worked their way back here, and so these are definitely the two teams that you want to see facing off, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. If you guys are excited, let me know down in the comments section below. If you want to know my thoughts on what I expected to see in this series, what I've seen throughout the majority of this tournament, you can check out the playlist in the iCard right now. In that playlist is going to be every single day of MSI covered on this channel. Every single game that both of these two teams have played, every single game at this tournament. Of course, if you want to check out the rest of the channel, I've covered every single game that both of these teams have played over the course of this entire year. I've covered all 4 of the major regions every single week on this channel. We'll be continuing to do that into the summer as well, so it's definitely a little bit of a fun series for me. I've been covering these two teams, these two rosters all year, basically in BLG's case for 2 years now. Gen.G with a few changes from last year, but I'm excited to see such a high-stakes series between a couple of these players, and I know you guys are as well. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. If you are new here, what we're going to do is go game by game, talking about the advantages and the disadvantages that each team was able to generate. I'll be giving a player of the game and a dud of the game for each individual game, and at the end of the series, I will be giving a finals MVP, a player of the series, to kind of tie everything into a nice, neat little bow. There is nothing else to preview. There is nothing else to talk about. It is winner take all here in the finals of MSI. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. As you can see up on your screen, it's a matchup between the number 1 seed from the LCK in Gen.G and the number 1 seed from the LPL in Bilibili Gaming, the two champions of the two best regions in the world. This is the matchup that we all wanted to see in the finals. These are the 10 players that we wanted to see get a shot at hoisting the MSI trophy, and here they are. A lot of really fun matchups when you go down the line. Keen versus Bin, probably the two best performing top laners at this tournament individually. Bin in particular has been the strength of Bilibili over the course of this tournament. They have won through a lot of different avenues. Elk and On have had a couple of really good series, and obviously they're the power point because of the way BLG play, but Bin really has been that consistent, stable presence on the top side, even without resources, which is what makes him so valuable to BLG. But it's not like Keen has been bad by any means at this tournament so far. And then you've got the mid-jungle. This is where things went wrong for BLG in the first series, as mid-jungle just kind of got super out of control. A lot of people point to the fact that Knight was not very good against Chovy, and I completely agree with that. Look at the individual laning stats. You will see a massive discrepancy. Chovy just completely outplayed Knight in that first series, but I did add a lot of context when I covered that series of Jun was just getting absolutely torched in the jungle matchup, and, I'm not trying to defend Knight entirely, but it is really hard to play mid lane 1v2 when the enemy jungler is constantly pressuring you and your jungler is nowhere to be found. It makes your life a lot more difficult. It means you're going to have to give up a lot more if your jungler is not really in a position to be able to respond to situations, and to me, that's really going to determine the rest of this series. Bot lane, top lane, I think you could say that's in favor of BLG, but mid-jungle has definitely been in favor of Gen.G, especially the last time these two teams played. If either of those flips, if bot lane ends up going in favor of Gen.G, or if mid-jungle ends up going in favor of BLG, then that's what I think will really tilt the scales of this series. Jun has to be good enough to be able to go up against Canyon, which he simply wasn't last time. Knight has to be able to survive 1v1 against Chovy, which he simply wasn't able to do last time. Because Elk on Bin, they've been good enough at this tournament to win you series, but Gen.G definitely with the momentum advantage because of their ability to win the previous one. A couple of players that are looking for their first ever major international wins, players like Elk and On, definitely looking to cement themselves as the best bot lane in the world. And then for Gen.G, Chovy Chovy, I mean, it's been well documented, but Chovy looking for his first ever international title. He is definitively the best player in the world right now. For him to have never hoisted an international championship, an international trophy, has been a bit of a travesty so far, and so this is his opportunity to rectify that. Keen, Pays, Lahens, all of them looking for some major hardware that they have yet to achieve. So a big series for both teams. My prediction at the end of the previous video was Gen.G in 5. It's really hard not to favor Gen.G because they did win last time. But like I said in that video, I would be shocked if things were as not close as they were in that previous series. I think Bilibili should be able to learn from their mistakes of not really helping or focusing on their bot lane and not being able to adapt to their game plan. They were able to do that well against T1, and they've been able to do that well against other teams. I think they should be able to do that well against Gen.G as well, but time will tell. The only way to find out is to go game by game, and that means starting with game number 1. So let's get into it. The winner of game number 1 was Gen.G. They are going to take the first game of this series. They're going to go up 1-0, and that's what you wanted to see from Gen.G. You wanted to see a team that said, we just beat you handily in the previous series. Yes, we dropped a game, and you looked good in that game, but once we figured out what your strategy was, once we adapted our own strategy to counter that, you had no answer, and we are going to continue to further that narrative here. And honestly, it was almost exactly the same story. I will say, credit to BLG. They were closer for a majority of this game than they were in any of their losses in winners finals. This was a close game. If they hadn't lost a couple of pretty crucial team fights in the back half here, they were actually in a relatively okay position. They were even in gold up until about 25-30 minutes into this game, somewhere around there, even if they didn't really have any sort of pressure, which we will get into. It wasn't exactly as close as the gold would indicate, but still, Bilibili had an opportunity in this game. You know, they were staying in it, but Gen.G simply was more clinical and certainly took less risks at the end of the game, and that ended up playing in their favor. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Player of the game in game 1, pretty obviously to me, is going to go to Canyon. On the Karthus, he has been pulling out these super aggressive picks in the jungle all tournament long. He's not really been doing this all year. Honestly, when you look back domestically, one of the big things that we were starting to praise Canyon for is he was looking so much better on tanks and on initiators than he did, in the back couple of years of D plus Kia. He wasn't looking great in 2023 or in 2022 on things like Sejuani and Maokai when they became super meta. He was always somebody who preferred these more aggressive carry-oriented junglers, and so when the meta kind of shifted out of that, he actually dropped off in terms of performance, but he got on Gen.G this year, a bunch of laners that are incredibly strong, Chovy, Keen in particular, very good 1v1ers, and had a lot more freedom to be able to play Sejuani and Maokai at a high level, and he had some of the best, tank engage type jungle play of his entire career. But now as we get into MSI, he's been playing Nidalee, he's been playing Karthus, and that's the Canyon that we all know. This is the legendary Canyon that, was looking to maybe cement himself as the best jungler of all time in a series like this, and he really did show up. One of the big notes, like I said in the preamble, was that Canyon really just gapped Jun in the previous series. Like, it was a jungle Canyon in the first time that these two teams played, and if that's going to continue to be the case, which, spoiler alert, it was again in this game, then that is just not going to bode well for BLG. They rely way too much on being able to play through the middle of the map, and Gen.G has just been able to systematically take that away. But the Karthus pick, very much working here. I think you can give credit to basically everyone. I thought Keen had a very good game on the Cassante. It was actually pretty difficult for him in the early game because Bin was doing a really good job to establish pressure on the Twisted Fate. We'll talk about him in a bit, but, Chovy was winning in the mid lane. The Yone pick was actually super strong on B5 to be able to kind of complement everything else that was going on for Gen.G, and then Senna TK is just kind of the LCK classic. They love that bot lane duo, and Pays was doing a ridiculous amount of damage with all the souls he was able to collect throughout this game. It was more of a team effort. It wasn't any individual crazy big outplay, major 5v5 win. They just were a lot more systematic and a lot more controlled in terms of how they played the late game, and I think it really did kind of push them over the top. For Bilibili, too many risks, too many oversteps, too many times getting caught out in situations where it really was bad that you got caught out. Jun is going to get done of the game for that exact reason. Him getting caught out right before Baron, giving that over to Gen.G, that was a game-losing play. I know the gold didn't exactly spiral out of control from there because they were still able to get, Chemsol, and they were able to stay alive in some of these fights. Bin was doing a lot of damage, even if he was never going to be somebody that could carry the game. Elk was actually doing a lot in that same vein. It just didn't really matter. That moment, they lost all of the pressure on the map that they had, and Gen.G got to dictate every single fight from that point onwards in the game. It wasn't just Xun, but I think Xun continuing to make mistakes in the mid game is really separating him from the best junglers in the world, like Canyon. This was going to be a question mark, right? Xun is another player who's never won an international title. He's very new to top-level competition. He had experience last year, of course, on Bilibili, in the MSI finals, at Worlds, in the semifinals, but he was never somebody that was the star or the carry for those individual teams, and he really hasn't been tested in the same way that other players in this series have, and I think he's getting a bit exposed at this tournament. He was really awful against Gen.G last time, and it really has not been a great start for him in this series. Knight also a couple of weird misplays. I don't know if Chovy is just in his head or what, but just a lack of aggression. We've seen some really good plays out of Knight at this tournament, and obviously this guy has won MSI. He won it last year. He was the MSI Finals MVP last year, and so we know he can do it. We know he can perform on the big stage, but the Chovy matchup just does not seem to be going in his favor. There were moments where he would run in as Nico, not ult, and just die, and it's very strange. You just don't see that out of players like Knight all that frequently. I think people are going to look at Bin and say, oh, he saved the game in a lot of these instances, and there were some fights that he just instantly carried, where he played really excellent and was in a really strong spot for his team, and then there were other fights where he died instantly, was way too far forward, was getting caught out in side lanes, and it's just like, you have to be a lot more clinical than that. I still think Bin was by far the best player here on BLG. Elkanon, I think we're generally fine in that same vein, but just too many small mistakes, and you can't make small mistakes against a team like Gen.G. They are going to capitalize on that way too easily, and you're going to leave yourself in a bad position, and that's exactly what happened here in game number one, a slow death, if you will. So BLG simply has to keep the pressure on. They're supposed to be the early game team out of these two. Gen.G a lot more clinical, a lot more stable in the back half of games. That's what they're known for. Even in the LCK, where they have this giant hands gap, they often would take games 25, 30 minutes deep against bad teams, because that's just where they thrive. That's what they like to focus on. BLG has to be able to shove that tempo forward. They have to be able to push that a lot quicker, or else they're going to just get completely out-macroed in a series like this. They have to be able to get Elkanon online. And for Gen.G, just do your thing. Crazy counter picks or not, right? Karthus plus Yone or not, or anything standard, that you can do whatever you want so long as you're able to execute in the way that you were able to in this game. Take those small advantages, take the one mistake that BLG is making and blow it into a gigantic lead. That's the Gen.G we know, and that's the Gen.G we love, and that's what got them this win in game number one. They just have to be able to keep that up. But are they going to be able to? Is BLG going to tie up the series, or is Gen.G going to be able to push this wide open, showing that they truly have a dominance over BLG right now with a 2-0 series lead? Well, the winner of game number two was Gen.G. They are gonna take game number two. They're gonna go up in this series 2-0, and they just style on them. This game was unbelievable to watch. It was honestly kind of crazy. We have the kill record for an international game, period, in the MSI finals, which is insane, and there's real argument that that person wasn't even the most valuable player to their own team in this game. We will get into that as we talk about it. I am making the rarest of exceptions. In fact, the first time in the, 3 or 4 years that I've been doing this every single week that I will be making this an exception, but we'll talk about that in a second. This game looks like it kind of was close. It went 40 minutes, 17 kills over to the side of BLG. Like, there are some reasons to believe that this game was interesting. It was not. Gen.G got such a gigantic early lead in this game from some crazy mid-game plays that the entirety of the late game was them limit testing and just, doing whatever they wanted over and over again until the game actually ended. Yes, BLG won a crucial fight in the back half of this game that led to them, getting Elder Dragon and really pressuring out the map here, but it wasn't ever like they were in the game. It never felt like they could ever win an actual front-to-back 5v5 so long as Gen.G actually played remotely well in that fight, and they eventually stopped trolling and they eventually started winning. But the big exception that you can see on your screen for the first time ever, genuinely, I think this is the first time ever in the history of this channel for the past 4+ years, I'm giving 2 player of the games. I know it feels like a very weird hill to die on, but I've really tried not to do this. I've tried not to give 2 player of the games. I've tried not to give 2 dud of the games. I've just tried to stay away from it because it opens up kind of a can of worms, but I simply just don't think that there is a different way to do it for this game. Lehens was the best player in this game, and he is the player of the game. But if I don't give Pays player of the game for him getting 27 kills in the MSI finals, then I'm doing something wrong. Like, even if he wasn't the most valuable player to his team, I'm doing something wrong if I don't do that. And so, yeah, they're co-players of the game here in game number 2. If you want to cry about it, but it's something that I feel like was kind of a necessity for this particular similar game, and it's something that I think really rings true in terms of the performance. The Blitzcrank utterly obliterated Bilibili. You could even make the argument that Lehens single-handedly won this game, or more, I guess accurately, Lehens single-handedly allowed Bilibili to lose this game. I think in terms of how he played, there were just so many positioning errors coming out from BLG, and Lehens was always there to capitalize. Whether it was pulling On, or whether it was pulling Shun or Bin, he was always landing a priority target. It was always at a time that was perfect for follow-up. He was perfect in this game on the Blitzcrank, about as perfect of a Blitzcrank game as you're gonna get at the highest level. And then, yeah, Pays just set the record for most kills in an international game. He deserves player of the game. I get that there's gonna be a large subsection of people that say, oh, Pays' job was so easy this game. You know, he just got gifted 27 free kills. You do not get gifted 27 free kills at this level. His positioning was really good. Go watch some of these fights. Some of them, he is the late insurance policy. And as Kalista, he's legit 1v3ing at multiple points in this game after his front line has died, and he is still successfully winning those fights. I get it. The flashy plays from Blitz really did set up a lot of the advantages that Pays had, but Pays still had to do something with it. It would have actually been super easy for him to just be a cog in the machine here, to allow Chovy or Canyon or Keen to really step up to the plate and be the highlight players in a lot of these team fights, but Pays was perfect in a lot of these fights as well, and so I have to give both members of the bot lane player of the game, because when you watch it, they just both were players of the game. There is no way to say that one was the defining member. When we think back on this game, we're going to think about the blitz hooks and Pays' record. That is what we're going to see. Keen was also exceptional. I really want to shout out Keen because I thought he was super good on the Zac. Was just way better than Bin throughout a majority of this game, constantly applying more pressure in team fights. And I get it, Bin really wasn't all that bad. You know, certainly had a worse scoreline than maybe his performance would indicate, but Keen was exceptionally good, and he has been at this entire tournament. Canyon was good. Chovy was probably the one member of the team that didn't do all that much this game on the Yone, and that's awesome. If Chovy's the player that you can rely on to just kind of take a backseat role and just let everyone else win, and you're still crushing Bilibili Gaming in the finals, like, yeah, you can live with that. You can definitely live with that. So Gen.G feeling pretty good about their 2-0 lead. They clearly have the intel and the advantage over BLG. They are showing their dominance once again, but for Bilibili, it's just crumbling down around you here in the finals. You're not looking particularly competitive right now, and it's just a little sad. All of your players are really playing below expectation level. I don't know if it's the pressure. I don't know if it's the matchup. I don't know what it is, but this was a bad game from them. Dud of the game for me is going to go to On in the support position. The dude might as well have had a target on his back that said Blitzcrank hook here. Like, I don't know what was going on, but On was just constantly walking into Blitzcrank hooks throughout the entirety of this game. There were like 3 or 4 fights where he just gets hooked at the start of the fight, never gets ultimate off, and just dies. And it's like, well, what was the point of picking Ashe if you're going to sit on the front line and just get hooked all game? Like, it just feels like a complete waste of time for everyone involved. On was horrible here. Knight missed so many shockwaves that I just can't even begin to start comprehending that. There were a couple that he hit that were really influential. Obviously, the one where he was, you know, the ball was on Camille and he jumps in and gets the 3-man shockwave. It really does, you know, I guess, quote unquote, keep Bilibili in the game. It's their biggest team fight win of the entire game. But there were so many that he missed in this game, and it's not Knight. Like, that's not how he plays. He's not, you know, somebody who just misses these random abilities. He is very clinical in terms of his execution, typically, and we've seen him at the highest level. We've seen him perform at the highest level, and so I don't know what's happening in this series, but he seems to be completely mentally out of it. Like, Shun is just not good. Like, there's no other way to put it. He's constantly out of position. He's late to every single fight, and I get it, the scoreline looks okay, but the gameplay was not okay. Bin was better. Elk was okay, and this one was certainly good in the early game, but just got less and less useful as the game continued to go along. Just quite a few problems, and now you're down 0-2 as Bilibili. You lost the previous series after going up 1-0. You lost 3 games in a row. You've lost 5 games in a row now against Gen.G. That certainly can't be a confidence booster, but you have to win now. You are on MSI point. Are you going to get swept out of the MSI finals? Because that would be incredibly disappointing. For Gen.G, that would be awesome. If you could sweep the MSI finals, that would prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are the best team in the world, and it's not particularly close. They are on pace for that. They look incredible so far in the finals, but are they going to seal it with a 3-0 series sweep, or is Bilibili going to keep this series alive and take a game off of Gen.G to push us to game number 4? Well, the winner of game number 3 was Bilibili Gaming, they are going to take Game 3 at the very least for now. They're going to keep their tournament hopes alive, and they are going to push us to a Game 4. Staying alive, obviously, was of the utmost importance in this series, and even at times here in Game number 3, it felt like that might not be entirely achievable for them. They were in a good position, I would say, for a majority of this game. You have a lot of early game pressure through your mid-jungle duo here of Nidalee plus Jace. Jace generally is just going to have a ton of prio in the 1v1 in the mid lane, which Knight did have this game, which is really nice to see. Something he's really lacked in that matchup against Chovy, both of the times that they played against each other so far at this tournament. But a lot of the early game can be described as bot 2v2 or 3v2 or 3v3 skirmishes that just happened to go Bilibili's way. That really is what kind of threw the game out of whack. Canyon did not have a particularly strong early game on the Lee Sin, was really relying on the rest of his team to win fights without him, which is not how you want to play that champion. Very strange game number 3 here from Canyon, which we will get into the more we talk about this, but I want to give a lot of credit to BLG. I think a lot of teams would have rolled over and died after game number 2. That was a very demoralizing, very negatively impacting game in terms of what I would expect their mental to be like moving back into game number 3, and they took that and they said, screw it. If we want to win this tournament, if we want to have any shot of being able to move on and win game 4 and win game 5, then we have to lock in and win game 3, and we have to do it the way that we know how to do it, and that's pick something like Nidalee in the jungle for Shun. You know, Nidalee in particular is kind of his signature pick. Back on Invictus Gaming, it was one of his big picks. Even here on Bilibili, it's kind of been his pocket pick. As a player, it's always been the champion that he's felt the most comfortable on. I was advocating for BLG to take this away from Gen.G in the previous series. They didn't do it then, but I'm glad to see that they're doing it now. And he went bot lane over and over again. They put Elkinon on something that could win in the team fights, that could be consistent in terms of their late game pressure. And they were able to win these 3v2s that Pace and Lehens were initiating in a lot of these cases because they were really aggressive and really confident from the first 2 games. And so that was the strategy that I wanted to see, and that's exactly what we did see. I think for the most part, everybody on BLG did their job, but Shun is going to get player of the game for me. It really is this simple. I think if Shun plays well, I think Bilibili win every single game. It is that much of a difference in the jungle for me right now. And that's not to say that there aren't differences elsewhere on the map. I think Chovy has certainly been better than Knight. Paze and Lehens have certainly been better than Elkinon across this series so far. Lehens versus On has certainly been the biggest gap in terms of individual positions. But if Shun can generate some level of pressure in the early game, there is enough talent on this team to win in the mid game from a lead and to be able to carry that out into an advantage. And so if Shun's in a good spot, I really do think it just opens up BLG for so much more. And that's exactly what we saw here. The Nidalee, obviously very much a comfort pick for BLG and for Shun, and I'm happy that they went to it. I'm happy they felt confident enough to be able to go towards it and say, this is what we want to prioritize in a situation like this. It wasn't just him, though. I thought Elk played really well in this game on the Senna. I think Knight played really, really well on the Jace. Some super clutch shock blast to hit a couple of members on Gen.G in some of these crucial fights in the back half of the game. This is easily his best game that he's had against Gen.G. I know that there was one play where he got caught out a bit early, but, you know, he was teleporting into a side lane and just kind of got spotted and just ended up getting CC chained into death. Outside of that, I actually thought he was essentially phenomenal in this game and probably their best team fighter in the later half of this game on Jason. That's super valuable. Bin was really good, especially in the final fight, was able to land that flash stun onto a couple of members, was able to kind of get that double kill and turn things around. He landed a solo kill earlier on in the game against Keen when it felt like he was getting picked off in a side lane. Those are a lot of positives. I think the only negative I can give BLG for this one is that they kept it too close, and a lot of that is on. On has been not good in this series, and it's a little bit weird because I actually thought he was pretty good the first time these two teams played against each other. I felt like, you know, On was probably the one player who was trying to do some things. Now it just feels like he's going in and dying immediately in every single fight. He was really bad in game 2, and honestly, he tried his best to throw game number 3. I don't know if it's nerves. I don't know what it is. It's not working right now. On's got to play a lot more controlled than this. This was chaos, but in like the negative way. And I know On can sometimes be a little bit inty because he is more aggressive, very similar to his counterpart in Lehens on the other side of this matchup. But this was not the On that was aggressive. This was the On that was not connected with the rest of his team. And you just can't get away with that for the rest of this series. So I want to see some things get cleaned up by BLG, but at least they were able to keep this series alive. For Gen.G, you just didn't really play the early game all that well. And I think you really suffered because of it. A couple of players felt like they were just off of champions that made them comfortable, specifically the top side of the map here. Canyon did not look good. He's going to get dud of the game here on the Lee Sin. Again, when you're getting outpaced early as Lee Sin, you're not going to be useful in the late game. You're not going to be able to find important catches, and Canyon really was not very good in this game, and that was really the big advantage Gen.G had, is it felt like a jungle Canyon every single game for Gen.G, and they didn't get that here in game number 3, and they lost because of it. I also think Keen looked a lot less comfortable on the Rumble, which is strange. He's a good Rumble player. We know he can play it at a high level, but maybe just get him back on things he can jump on top of you with. That seems to be something that he feels very comfortable on right now. Maybe the Rumble, even as a counter pick, isn't really the style that you might want to go for in this particular instance, but those are minor nitpicks. I still think Pays is playing great. Lahen's actually landed a couple of really crucial arrows in this game. He was also getting picked off pretty early, though. The weaknesses of Ashe as a champion, I think, have been exploited pretty well across this series, and Chovy, to his credit, was trying to land things, but Elk is too good. Like, that really was the difference. Elk's mechanics and micro in this game were just ridiculous. His ability to dodge skill shots is at, like, an S+ tier level, and unfortunately for Chovy, that means Hwei as a champion is just a little bit less effective, so it is what it is. But for Gen.G, you're still up 2-1. You still have shown a strong control over this series. If you win game 4, now all of a sudden you're looking at game 3 as a game that you just kind of let get away from you. You allowed the Nidalee to just kind of run the early game, and you weren't able to pull it back, and that's okay. You were able to close out things in 4. But if you lose game number 4, now you're looking at a series tied up at 2 apiece, and you've lost both of the last 2 games. The BLG comeback at home here in China would be very real. You do not want to go to a Silver Scrapes game number 5 if you are Gen.G, but that is the hope for Bilibili. Can they push us to a game number 5 and keep the reverse sweep hopes alive here in the MSI Finals, or is Gen.G going to shut the door and win one of their most recent championships? Well, the winner of game number 4 was Gen.G. They are gonna take game number 4. They are gonna wrap up this series 3-1, and your 2024 mid-season invitational champions, Gen.G from the LCK. They have done it for the first time since the rebrand. The first time as Gen.G, they are hoisting an international championship. Congratulations to this team. Congratulations to this org. They have been perennial challengers, perennial contenders for years and years and years. They are multiple-time LCK champions. They are multiple-time representatives of the LCK at international events, and yet they are finally able to say that they are champions internationally. Congratulations to them. There is nothing else I can say other than this is far beyond well-deserved. This is long overdue for a couple of these players, for this org in general, an org that has done such a phenomenal job of consistently being competitive in one of the most competitive environments in the entire world. They are constantly able to not only put out world-class teams, but bring world-class players up, even players that you might not expect. Delight running through this system last year and becoming a world-class player. Pays on this team right now. Nobody thought he was going to be world-class so quickly. He's 18 years old, and obviously it helps that you've got players like Chovy on this team to build around. It helps that someone like Lahen's wanted to return to this roster, that Canyon and Keen could be convinced, but all of these things stem from this organization being as strong as it has been over the past couple of years. And, I said it. I'll say it again. It's been long overdue for Gen.G to hoist an international trophy like this. For Bilibili Gaming, it's unfortunate that you came so close yet again. Your second straight MSI Finals loss definitely is going to sting a little bit. You weren't quite as close as maybe you would have wanted to be in this one, but all that really proves to me is that Gen.G is really that good, that they are the S+ team in the world right now. I think BLG is still really strong. We saw that throughout the rest of this tournament. They handily took care of everyone else that they needed to, including T1, who was stiff competition for Gen.G domestically. I think BLG is going to be just fine. I know it feels bad right now, but this team is going to be able to turn it around. They are going to continue to be a powerhouse domestically, and there is a very real possibility that we could be looking at a preview for the Worlds Finals in this series, earlier on this year. There's a lot that can happen in the summer split, but we'll talk about them in a minute. Player of the game and player of the series, my finals MVP, really couldn't have gone to anybody else. It's Lahen's in the support position. I don't want to take this opportunity to like do too much of the pandering and the, I got this right, or yada, yada, yada. I really try not to do stuff like that on this channel, but I got so much hate in my LCK off-season grades video that I made back in December of last year, where I was talking about, here are the changes that I like, here are the changes that I don't like, here are grades for every player. I got a ton of hate that Chovy was an A+, was the only A+ in the LCK. I got so much hate that I thought Chovy was the best player in the LCK because he couldn't do it internationally. I got so much hate that I said Lehens was going to be just as good, if not better, than what Delight was for this team because of what he was for KT last year. There were so many comments that just did not agree with my takes, and I respect it, right? I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm always right. I've certainly gotten takes wrong in the past, but this is why I trust the process, because there are always situations where you just have to believe your eyes. You have to believe the tape, you have to believe what you believe. And I believed in these players. I believed in this org. And now we're sitting here with Lehens as finals MVP, with Chovy clearly outclassing Knight, who I also had as an A+ going into the year. And we're looking at a situation where we might be looking at one of the best teams that we've had in recent memory. But that's just a little bit of a sidetrack. I'm not going to go on that rant for too long. I hope the 30 seconds to 1 minute that wasn't too annoying for everybody. I tried to save it for the end of the video, so you only stuck around if you're all that interested. But let's talk about the game itself. Lehens is getting player of the game because of his ability to control the early game. Not only did he completely outplay a 1v3 dive for first blood on the top side, we'll talk about On in a second, who misplayed basically everything he did in this entire game and for a lot of this series, but he was also fantastic in some of these team fights. That Maokai ultimate is just so reliable, and especially coming out of the support position, you're not relying on him to position super aggressively in terms of being able to secure objectives. He can really just try to get into the best possible position to keep the enemy team out of contested areas, and I think Lehens was obviously super good at being aggressive, and I think the Senna really helps out the Maokai. Not only does it keep him alive in fights, but it gives him an opportunity to play a little bit more solo in certain parts of the game, and I think that generally getting that kind of gold on Maokai, especially out of the support position when you don't have to rely about being the primary initiator and engage threat on the team, is only a positive, and I think Lehens played it exceptionally well. The support gap in this series was ginormous, which is especially surprising to me, not only because the talent level of these players isn't all that different, but because the first time these two teams played, bot lane really wasn't a huge issue in terms of individual skill. This is very different to what we saw in Winners Finals, and that's a credit to Gen.G, and that's a credit to Lehens, who more than deserves to hoist this trophy, but rightfully so. A lot of this narrative is going to be around Chovy. This guy has been talked up and talked up and talked up, me included. I called him the best player in the world going into the year. He was the #1 player in the world for me at the start of 2024, and all he has done is completely reinforce that ideology, completely reinforce that mentality, and, I feel really happy to see him finally get his just due. I hate this narrative that international events are the end-all, be-all. I think winning the LCK 3 or 4 times in a row really means a lot. That itself should have proven to you that Chovy is at the very least in the conversation for the best player in the world. I hate this idea that because he's not been good on one patch over one tournament, once a year, that he's not the best player in the world. I think it's just kind of a limited argument. And this is a tournament that I think gives you a good example as to why. Because all Chovy had to do was play up to his standard once, and he ran through everybody. And you're not looking at a meta where he couldn't play any of his signature picks. You're looking at a place where he felt comfortable, like a lot of the other worlds in MSI winners did, and he looked better than anybody else at this tournament by a large margin. He is the best player in the world, and he proved it once again here. Pays sets the kill record in game #2 for an international game as an 18-year-old. This kid was 17 years old last year, and to me was an MVP caliber player in the LCK. Things haven't always been as good so far in 2024, but to hoist the MSI trophy, I'm pretty sure that he'll take some less than amazing individual performances if it means that he gets to be a champion internationally so early on into his likely incredibly successful career. And then Keen, how do you not be excited? How are you not excited for Keen? This guy got stuck on the Freaks for so many years. He was in Freak jail for so many years. He's finished in every single place in the LCK. He finally wins the LCK in the spring split of this year for the first time in his long career. And what does he do? He parlays that into an MSI trophy, an international trophy. It's hard not to be poetic about his rise to the top, and he's earned every bit of it. He's been one of the best top laners in the world for half a decade at this point, and he finally gets the trophy to show it off. And then Canyon. I mean, at this point, are we sure that he's not just guaranteed the best jungler of all time? He is for me. Like, to me, in my eyes, Canyon is the best jungler to ever play League of Legends. I think this is just another accolade for him. He's got the greatest peak of all time with Damwon, and now here he is with Chovy and with Pays and Lehens and Keem, winning yet another one for an org that has struggled so much to overcome that hurdle, to jump over that glass ceiling. They have done it as this group of 5, and again, I cannot be more excited for them. They have earned it. This organization has earned it, and I'm really, really happy to see it come to fruition. And then for Bilibili, again, this has to feel bad. Like, you definitely didn't play the way that I think you wanted to in this series. Game 3 was nice, and, you know, there were moments at the end of game number 2, you know, you were relatively even in game 1, and game 4 here actually had some pullback moments. You tried a couple of back doors a couple of times this game. Knight and Elk in particular played some of these late fights incredibly well. The Tristana plus Zeri combo almost brought them back into this game. Shun was doing 1 billion damage every single time he was landing a spear. It just wasn't enough to be able to overcome the hurdle. On in particular had a really rough day. He's going to get dead of the game here in game 4, and he was pretty bad, I would say, throughout the entirety of this series. Even their win in game number 3, he was trying his best to not win that game. I don't know if it was nerves, I don't know what it was, but On just wasn't good enough today, and I think that really was kind of the difference. I'm not going to say they would have won this series had they had Lehens instead of On, but I certainly do think that it would have been closer for sure. I think Elk played really well in the finals, and he was great throughout the tournament. Knight is going to get a lot more hate for this performance than he deserves. He was awesome in games 3 and 4, and those are the games where you want to see him step up anyways. Shun, I think, was definitely better in games 3 and 4 when he got his comfort pick in the Nidalee, and Bim, definitely some explosive plays throughout the entirety of the series. They just weren't enough to overcome the best team in the world, and that's okay for now. Rebuild, go back to the LPL, dominate it like you did in summer of last year, and make your way back to Worlds to prove that you are a team that deserves to be in this spot. I firmly believe that they have the capacity and the ability to do that, and I'm excited to see where they go in the future, but it's all about Gen.G. Congratulations to this team. They've earned every bit of praise that they are going to get here, and honestly, at this point, if the doubters are still out there about players like Chovy and players like Pays and Lehens and Keen, I don't know where they are, because they have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that right now, they're the best in the world. All right, but that is going to do it for my MSI Finals overview and analysis video. Gen.G, your 2024 MSI champions. We move now into the Summer Split. I'm super excited. I'm super pumped up for what Summer Split has to offer. Of course, if you haven't followed the channel until MSI, we cover every single game of every single major region every single week on this channel. So if you are interested in League of Legends coverage, stick around. Hit that subscribe button. You're going to be interested in the coverage that I give on all of these regions, not just on the international tournaments. You want a good assortment of knowledge when going into those international tournaments, and I think hopefully this content can help a lot of people with that. Hit subscribe, hit that bell so you can be notified when all those videos come out. The primers for the regions are going to be coming out a couple of days before their seasons start. I know we've got a bit of a break in between, but definitely going to be working on those as soon as tomorrow. But if you enjoyed the video, leave a like. It really does mean a lot to me. Lets me know you guys are enjoying the content, and it does help get this video out to a lot more people, which I'm always very appreciative of. This has been one of the best international tournaments of all time in terms of the games and the performances and the storylines that we've ever gotten. I mean, truly, this has been an exceptional MSI, and so, you know, I really do appreciate you guys sticking with me for the ride. If you've been here for all the videos, it really does mean a lot. But with all that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. Hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all